Hi and welcome to another very exciting tutorial. In this video I'd like to show you how to build rather complex layouts and a rather complex user interface using only SwiftUI. This is the demo app that we're going to build. We have these horizontally scrolling scroll views actually. We can enter one of these elements right here, one of these drinks, a cappuccino for example, or an espresso. We get a detail view here. We could order something. This is nothing that we have implemented here, but the navigation clearly works, and all the data is stored locally coming from a JSON file. We're going to build the data model from scratch. Make sure to subscribe to not miss any future tutorials also about SwiftUI, and now let's get started. So here I just have a plain single view application using SwiftUI, and we're going to start by just adding some files here as resources. I have all the images that I'm going to need for my application right here. I'm just going to store all of that locally, so we're not going to have to deal with downloading anything from the web to actually concentrate on doing everything here in SwiftUI and not having to worry about networking code. So I'm just using my images here, and I can just drag and drop them into my assets folder so that they're available in my project. As simple as that. And what I also have is a data source, which is just a JSON file that I'm going to drag right below my info plist file, which stores all of the information that I need. And you could even use this if you were to create kind of a database application yourself, where you have different kinds of information, different pieces of information that you really do not need to download from the web, and you don't really have to create an SQLite database or a core data database in order to make your information available. So here we just have an ID for every item. We have the name of our drink. We have the name of the image file that associates, of course, with the name that we have for the specific file in our assets folder. So the iced cappuccino, for example, if we scroll down a little bit, also has, of course, the same name. We do have a description, and we have a category that tells us either our drink or our beverage is hot or it is cold. So with all the pieces of information ready, let's now worry about the data model and how to actually get this data. I told you that I don't want to worry about network code, and I also don't want to worry about loading anything, but what we still have to do is load the content of this JSON file. So just press Command N on my keyboard to create a new Swift file. And this is going to be called data, because here we're going to load all the information that we need, and what I just pasted is just a very simple load function that receives a file name as a parameter. We have a default type, it's all generic, and this just loads a file from our bundle for a specific resource name, and then we get the data that is stored in this file, and then we use a JSON decoder to actually bring all of that information that is stored in our JSON file into a format that we can work with and actually map it to the model that we create right now. So I'm just going to create a new drink file, and this is going to be our struct for our drink. This is going to be hashable, this is going to be codable, and this is also going to be identifiable, which we first have to, or just to make this work, we first have to import SwiftUI, because this protocol is only available in SwiftUI, and we need these protocols to actually fully work with our data model. For example, we need identifiable to display things in a list. We need codable to be able to map our JSON data into our model right here, and we can use hashable for a very efficient categorization process later. But now let's create all the properties that we need. First of all, we're going to need an integer. We're going to need a name, which is a string. We're going to need an image name string. And we're also going to have a category, which for now is a string. And we are going to have a description, which is also a string. And I said for the category that at the moment we use a string, but let's create an enumeration here for the category, which is a string enumeration, which is case iterable and codable and hashable. And then we are going to have two cases. The first one is hot. That's also getting a raw value of hot. And we're also going to have a case cold, which is also going to get the raw value of cold. And now with these categories ready, we can now remove our string as the type for our category property and replace it with category as its type. And this is just going to be our simple data model that we're going to use to populate our user interface. So we have the ID, we have the name, which would be, for example, iced coffee. We have the image name that allows us to load an image such as these. We have the category that allows us to put all of these drinks into its specific category for cold drinks and the hot drinks. And we have the description that we can see when we actually open one of these items or the shortened version in these cells. So this is our data model. So let's work now from the inside out. So we're going to start with this simple drink item that consists of an image, the name of a specific drink, and its description. And later, as a next step, we're going to create this row. And at the end, we're going to put together everything, and we're going to create our home screen and our detail view for each of these drinks. So let me now select maybe the content view for now, and let's create a new file here. This is going to be a SwiftUI view. I'm going to call it, let's say, drink item. And let's hit create, and we have our empty file. But now it would also be cool to actually work with real data. So what we can do, since we have our drink type, can create a property here in our struct drink item. Let's call it drink of type drink. And we should also be able to actually load our data now. So let's go into the data.swift file. Let's create an object right here. Let's call it maybe drink data, which is going to be an array of drinks. And then we can simply use our load function to get our different drinks from the drinks.json file. And now we have an array of drinks in the drink data array, and this is going to be the source of truth for our application. And now let's go back to our drink item, and we still have to initialize our drink item in the preview provider here. So let's do that. Let's pass along our first drink from the drink data array, and let's just use the first object here. And then we can resume our canvas here to actually see our progress a little bit better. And we're going to start with our image. So let's just add an image here. We can just use our drink and access its image name here to actually display the image. Now let's hit resume one more time to actually see something. So here we have a pretty large image. Let's first of all make this resizable. And now this still doesn't look too good. So let's make or change the aspect ratio and the content mode to fill. And now we have the correct aspect ratio. But now what we still need is a better frame. Let's say maybe width of 300, a height of 170. We don't have to specify an alignment here. So this already looks a little bit better. And now we can also give it a corner radius of, let's say, 10. And then let's say maybe also a shadow of 5. Well, let's make the shadow 10, corner radius 5. How does that look? Well, let's make both 10. Still looks cool. So with that, we actually have our card ready. What we still need to do is to change the so-called rendering mode. Because when we change the navigation appearance of our category items later, and we don't use or we don't change the rendering mode with a modifier called rendering mode, then what happens is that when we pass something when we pass information along in our view hierarchy, the images, they render using the environment's accent color, or images may render as template images. So to make sure that we always see our image, we use the rendering mode original here so that we can see this image every time we use it throughout our view hierarchy. So, and this is the first piece of UI that we are going to have. So the next one is going to be some text. We want the drink name, and we also want its description. So let's first of all maybe use our image here and embed that in a virtual stack. Give this an alignment of leadings. As you can see, I'm just using the inspector here by pressing Command on my keyboard, clicking on this on the V stack here, for example. I can inspect something here, and then I get this nice inspector for some of the properties that I can use. And here I'd like to also add a spacing of 16. So with that, I think I'm done here. So let's now add another item. Let's say we have our drink name as a text. So we have our drink, we have our name. Let's give this a color, primary color, and let's change the font to, let's say, headline, and that is going to be our name. And now I like to change the spacing a little bit more between our next item. So we're going to have the drink and its description, and here I'm going to change the font to subheadline. I'm going to go with a color of secondary, and we're going to have a multi-line text here. So I'm going to set the alignment to leading and the line limit to 2, and I'm going to give it a proper frame with a height of, let's say, 40 pixels to also have space for those two lines. Let's say height 40. And now what I actually want to do is take both of these texts and put them in their own stack with their own spacing, because I don't want them to be spaced out so wide. So let's add a new V stack right here. Just with, I can just add the properties later, or the parameters. I'm going to shift that a little bit. All right. So let's quickly use the inspector again to change some of the properties here. Let's change the spacing to 5, the alignment to leading, and then we have exactly the look that we want for our items here. We have the image, we have the title or the name, and we have the description. So next, let's create these rows that we will later insert to our home screen, if we'd like to call it that way. So let's create a new file. Selecting content view, press Command N on the keyboard, selecting SwiftUI view, going to name that, let's say, drink row. And here we are going to have two properties. First of all, we're going to have our category name, which is a string, and we again need a drink to work with, or actually we need multiple drinks because we display multiple drinks in one row. So this is going to be an array of drink objects. And as you can see, if we have a look at the final product, we have this category name here that could either be cold drinks or hot drinks. And we have our elements here. So these are going to be the properties that we need. And we also need, again, to initialize that in our preview provider here. So let's pass along, let's say, hot drinks, and also pass along, first of all, let's keep all the drink data, so our complete array. Doesn't matter if the category is right or not for the moment. So now let's maybe resume here to actually see what we can do. Or actually, let me just quickly rename our drink to drinks because we're working with an array of elements here. So now we should be good. And now I can actually place a drink item. Let's use drinks here and use, let's say, the first object. And let's see what we have here. And there is our drink item that we just created. Now let's maybe give it a frame with a width of 300 to make this more specific. And let's also give it a padding for trailing of 30. And now we actually can already think about getting multiple of these items. So since we're not going to work with a vertical list here, we're going to work with a scroll view. Let's first of all use a for each block here. What do we want to iterate through? We're using our drinks. Let's say they're identified by the key name that would be possible. And then for each of these drinks, we're going to have a drink object that we can use. So let's quickly cut that and paste that right into our for each block and then replace our access to the drinks array with just the drink in this closure that we have here. And now what happens is if I zoom out a little bit, we get quite a number of elements here in our canvas. So these are actually all the drinks that we have. That's not exactly what we want. So let's maybe put all of that into a scroll view. So let's use a scroll view right here and just cut that for each block here, paste that right there. And now we have a scroll view, or at least we have a scroll view, a vertical scroll view. Now we actually want a horizontal scroll view. So let's first of all embed our for each block here, pressing Command on my keyboard, clicking on for each. Let's embed that in a horizontal stack. And now we have what we actually want. And we can just make a little more adjustments here. We could, for example, set the alignment to top. We could also maybe deactivate the scroll indicators for our scroll view. But as you can see, something like that, if I just hit the inspect button here for the scroll view, I can't really adjust this specific property or this modifier. So what I have to do is actually initialize that right here with shows horizontal indicator, set this to false. I'm excited to see if this is going to change in future beta versions and that you get more options in the inspector. But for now, let's just type it and specify shows horizontal indicator as false right now. So this is the first element of our row. But as you remember, we also have the title right here, or the category name. So let's again embed our scroll view now in a vertical stack. This is going to get the alignment of leading. And here as a first element in this stack, I'm going to add some text. It's going to be our category name. And I'm just going to give that the font title, or a title font, to actually give this a pretty large appearance. So this is pretty much our row, but what we can still do, since when we touch one of these rows, we're actually displaying the detail. So now is maybe also a good time to create this detail view and later add a navigation button around our drink item. So these are our items, and we actually want to make them pressable and bring us with each press to the correct detail view that we still have to create. So let's do that right now, or maybe Let's not do that. Let's maybe first of all create our home view. And here I'm just going to rename my content view. Let's call that home for now. Let's rename that to home view. Here, let's also going to rename that to home view. And also this is going to be home view. And what we also have to do is when we do that, and we have a different entry point now into our application, we need to go into the scene delegate file and scroll down when we actually set the root view controller of our window. And here we're using a hosting controller. This is all done by the template, a UI hosting controller, which is part of UIKit, which we can use to actually work with SwiftUI together with UIKit. And here we now have to pass along our home view instead of the content view. And as soon as we did that, we can start to think how to actually categorize or add these categories to our home view. Because at the moment, if we have a look at our data array, we only have all of our elements in this array. So all of the drinks that we have in this array coming from our drinks.json file, and we have the category cold or hot. So there is quite a simple way to actually work with that very efficiently. So let's maybe create a categories property right here that is going to be a dictionary with a string or with strings as keys and an array of drinks as values. So now, wouldn't it be cool if we had a dictionary with the keys hot and cold and could access an array that actually contains all of the hot and all of the cold drinks that we have? And indeed, that's possible and quite simple. We just have to initialize our dictionary right here with two parameters. One is called grouping, and here we can just pass along our drink data, and we want to group our elements by using our category and its raw value, so either hot or cold. Let's quickly build that and see that we did not make any mistake, but here we misspelled our drink data, but that should work fine. And now we can concentrate on the actual UI. So at the moment, we just have our hello world text right here. We're going to replace that, first of all, with a navigation view. This is where all the action happens. And now here we are actually, again, working with a list. But this list is going to have our categories as a data provider. We're accessing the keys of our categories array, or of our categories dictionary, and then we want them to be sorted. We wouldn't have to actually do that. We just get them in alphabetical order right now. I just prefer it that way. And now we actually can use identified by a string, which will give us all of the keys that we can now work with in our list. So we are going to get two items here. We're going to get hot and cold, and we can now use this key in our closure. And for each key, we're going to create a drink row with a category name, which is going to be, let's add a string here. Let's also use string interpolation to get the key here, and going to be hot or cold drinks, and I actually want this to be uppercased. And to actually get the correct drink, we can now access our categories dictionary with the correct key that we have here in our list. So that's all there is to it. So we have cold drinks, we have hot drinks. That's already pretty cool. And now we can also give our row a frame, let's say, maybe a height of 320, and let's add a padding right here, maybe a bit on top, also padding at the bottom, and that's actually it. Now this looks already pretty cool, doesn't it? And all we need actually is just a title for our navigation bar. So let's add a navigation bar title. This should be a text. I'm going to call it Coffee DB. And here we are. We have finished our home screen. Isn't that cool? Now, with our home screen ready, we can now actually press, or we should be able to press on one of our buttons right here, or on one of our items, but we still do not need do not have a detail view. And this is going to be actually the most complicated view that we're going to create. So let's get right at it and create a new SwiftUI file. Let's call it drink detail, and let's have a quick look at why this is actually a little bit more difficult than the rest of the views that we worked with. Let me just quickly switch to light mode again, because that makes it a little bit easier to see. If we open one of these up, then you can see that right behind our title, we have this little darker area that helps us read the actual text. Here you can see it quite well for the espresso. So we're darkening this area here, which means that in addition to our horizontal and vertical stacks, we're now going to work with a Z stack that allows us to actually position elements in front of each other. So let's maybe just start right now with our drink detail. Again, we need a drink item to work with. So let's quickly create a drink here as a property, just a drink. Let's also initialize that right here with a drink from our drink data. Let's maybe use the third one. Just to give it a little variation in what we see. And we're going to start with the image. Let's quickly add an image here of our drink. So let's use drink and the image name to initialize our first image object right here. So this is something we already had. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make this resizable again. We're also going to change the aspect ratio here and set this to fit, which makes it a lot smaller already. And now this is actually the first part of our UI. We have this upper part here, and we now want our darkened area to appear right on top of this image, but pinned to the bottom. So what we can do is select our image, press Command on the keyboard, select image, and hit not inspect, but embed in VStack, and change the V to a Z, and then we already have a Z stack. And here we can now actually hit inspect again, and we cannot do what we want because we cannot change the alignment. So again, as you can see, we have to work in code here. We can't use the UI. Maybe it's going to change, maybe not. I actually hope it will. So let's change alignment to bottom. Come on. So now we have the alignment set up, and we can add just a simple rectangle. As you can see, it's just black. And I'm going to adjust the frame here to start with and set this to a height of just 80. As you can see, it's positioned exactly where we wanted it to be at the bottom. If we set this to be on the top, it would just move to the top, but now it's kind of pinned to the bottom. And we're going to change the opacity to, let's say, 2.25, so 25%. And we're going to give this a blur of 10, and that should actually do it. And we have a subtle yet very legible area to put our text somewhere. So, and this text is going to be located in a horizontal stack. And here we're going to add a vertical stack with a leading alignment, and let's say spacing 8. And here in this vertical stack, we're going to put some text, which is going to be the name of our drink, which should not be black. Let's set the color to white. Let's set the font to a large title, because it's the most important piece of information, actually. And within our horizontal stack, we can now give our vertical stack some padding, add some leading padding, or actually, let's just, first of all, add a spacer here so that we can see that it's moved to the left. And then it's going to make a lot of sense to actually add some padding here for the leading, and also some bottom padding to actually give this some more space here. And I think that looks quite nicely now. And we can move on to the next element that we have here, which is going to be our actual text. So as you can see, putting that into a list gives us quite nice behavior. If this were longer, we would get quite a bunch of stuff for free. We get this nice divider line and so on. So let's first of all put our Z stack now inside a list. So embed in list. We do not need items. We just need the list here to get the list behavior. And then we can just move on and closing down our Z stack. This is going to allow us to actually see more of what we actually need. So now let's actually add a second element right here, which is going to be our text based on the description in our drink data array, or in our drink data object from the array. Let's quickly try to run this again to see our changes. And as you can see, we now have our image, we have our title, and we have our description. I actually want this to have our primary color. I also want this font to be a little different. Let's set this to body. And I actually don't want to have this, or this should not have a line limit. So I'm going to set the line limit to nil. And you just saw it blink for a second. This is what we expect it to look like. But in the canvas, we don't get the result, but it still works. So let's keep it that way. And we're going to add a line spacing of 12. Right here. So just to move all of these lines a little bit further away from each other. So this is going to be our text. Now let's make some more adjustments to our list here. First of all, what I'd like to do is remove the space here between the edge of our phone and the image. So I'm going to use list row inset and set this to just edge insets so that we get rid of this distance here. And then what we also want is our little blue button below our text. So let's maybe insert our text here into a vertical stack and add a new horizontal stack for our button. But since this is already so crowded, let's maybe create our button in a new struct. Let's call that order button, adopting the view protocol, then creating a new body property with some view, and then we can just create our button. At the moment, it's going to have just an empty block here as an action. We could, of course, add some action here to actually allow it to do what it says, which is order something. So this is going to be our button that we're going to configure in a second. But for now, let's just add our button or order button right here and place that inside a horizontal stack and resume here for a second to actually see it. And there we have it. It appears to be centered at the moment, and that is because it is. What we still want to change, if we have a look at our result, is to actually give our text a leading alignment. So within our vertical stack, let's quickly use the inspector here, change the alignment to leading, which will also result our order now button to have this leading alignment. But what we can do here now is use our horizontal stack and just add two spacers in front and after our text so that we can, or in front of our button, so that we actually move it to the center, which we should see now any second. Add another spacer here, resume, and here we go. We have the Order Now button in the center. So with that done, we can now have a look at the button and make it a little bit prettier. So we have our text and nothing else. So let's maybe change the frame of the button, give it a width, let's say 200, and a fixed height of 50. This already makes it a little bit larger, but we can't see anything yet. So let's set the background to blue color so that we can see something. What we also want now is maybe change the foreground color to white to make it more legible. Also, let's change the font to headline. And with all of that done, let's also give it a corner radius of 10 so that it looks a little bit nicer. So this is a cool button. So let's give it a little bit more space between the text and itself. So using our horizontal stack, I'm just going to give that a padding on top of 50. And this already looks a lot better. And now is maybe the first time that we can launch our application and see what it looks like to make some final adjustments. But what we have to do still is to enter our drink row to actually put our drink items into a navigation button. So the destination of our button is going to be a new detail, a drink detail view. So we're going to initialize that with the drink that we get from this for each block. We're not going to specify if it's on if it is a detail. We don't need a label or anything else. We're just interested in the destination. So let's put some curly braces around all of that, shift our code a little bit to the right, and let's build that real quickly. And now we should have the ability to move to our cappuccino or espresso or whatever. And now let me quickly run this in the simulator and see if all of that works. So we have our coffee database. We have our scroll views that work quite nicely. We also have the ability now to press on one of these elements, and we pretty much have the result that we wanted. There's still a little problem. For example, the navigation bar on top that takes some space from us, and also the edge insets that are not, or the safe area that we're not yet ignoring. So let's go back to our detail, drink detail view, and change what we have here. So this is our list, and here we are going to add some edges, ignoring safe area, let's say on top, and also let's say navigation bar title, no, not the title, navigation bar is hidden. Let's set this to true. Now let's run this in the simulator one more time and see how this looks. So let's open one of our drinks, and this looks a lot nicer. But what we could maybe still do is add a little bit more space between where our text starts and between our order button and this divider line. So after our V stack here, let's maybe add some padding on top and some padding at the bottom. And that should give us a better result. So let's maybe choose another beverage here. Cold brew looks really nice. Cappuccino, also the espresso, and our little darker field here really gives us a nice little touch that looks really cool on each of these pictures and makes the text really legible. And this now is a little bit more advanced user interface, all created with SwiftUI. We can clean this up a little bit. So we have 4 views actually. We can select them, create a new group from selection. And these are our views. We have two files that are related to our model, so let's maybe also group them inside a model group folder. And with that, I hope you enjoyed our little SwiftUI session today. One last quick tip, if you're working with the simulator and you want to switch really quickly to the dark mode, you can just press this little icon here, which is representing the environment overrides. We can activate the dark mode here, and we have quickly switched our simulator to this dark appearance, and we can have a quick look at how this actually looks on a device with dark mode turned on. So moving forward, I thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to this channel to not miss any future tutorials also about SwiftUI. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.